Welcome to Testing in the Pub.
Hi again, and welcome to Testing in the Pub. It's been a while. Today we're going to talk about how you can be an effective team member. So, as a tester, we're making the assumption here an agile team primarily. So you're working very closely with developers and business analysts and UX and so on. How you can be as effective as possible in that team, and hopefully you can pick up some hints and tips along the way. So, Dan is here as usual.
Yep.
Hello, Dan.
How's it going?
Good, thank you.
So, being a valid and valued team member.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start with Agile, because there's a lot of talk going around where everyone should be called a developer.
Yep.
So, how does that kind of work? I think there's a huge misconception here where people think that everyone should sort of be in this hybrid role where anyone can do anything.
Yeah.
But that's completely not what Agile is about. You need to have your specialist areas, and Agile is about working collaboratively as a team, taking responsibility as a team, but still having your area, your T-shaped testing, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
T-shaped team members.
I think it's that middle ground. I think it's kind of the key. I think it's important that people are technical enough, particularly from a testing perspective. I think that's been a common issue in the past, has been that testers haven't been seen as technical, and this is where this misconception about anyone can test has come from. So I think being able to speak the right technical language, being able to understand the architecture, for example, of the software that you're testing, and having that technical ability, maybe that technical ability also to at least read pseudocode or something like that, it gives you the ability to have discussions with everyone else in the team in a language that they understand.
Well, I'm tempted to disagree with that, actually. I don't think... Actually, what I'm going to say is it depends what you mean by technical, because there's many different perspectives on this, right? And if you ask a developer what do they mean by technical, they'll say, well, being able to program, being able to script, write code. But I don't think a tester necessarily has to be able to write code, unless you're specifically in a role that requires you to do so. By writing code, I mean being able to develop an application if you need, or develop a tool if you need. Now, some roles do require that, but many testing roles don't require that.
No, but I guess an ability at least to understand how the code works, and understanding how it works is easier to pick up than, for example, here's a blank slate, go away and write me a program that does X or Y or Z. So I think that's why I quite deliberately said pseudocode. when talking about that kind of tech language, it's that ability to.
Code sounds so retro, though.
It does sound retro. It does sound. I'm an old man. No, I'm not. But it's about being able to at least understand how software works and how software is put together, and basic kind of good programming principles.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you may very rarely go looking at the code, but also if you're thinking like that and your mind is working like that, I think it can really help when you're having discussions, particularly with developers and teams, and it makes it easier to find that middle ground. And I think that's one thing that really helps you be effective and a valued team member, is that if everybody works closely together, and working closely together does mean finding a middle ground.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this then. There is this how much technical knowledge is enough, where I totally understand what you're saying. If I find a bug, I'll look at the source code, if it's a website or a web app, and dig as much information out there about the bug that I found, and relay that information. That's technical. Being able to manipulate databases and write SQL scripts, that's technical knowledge. I would class that as technical. So yeah, knowing that is very useful, but I think it's very much tools thing. I think being able to write SQL scripts, that's using a tool to manipulate a database, so your browser dev tools, that's tools. Being able to view the source code, that's a tool, and log files, I would class them as more tools. So I guess that builds up your technical knowledge.
It does, and I think let's use an example. I mean, say you raise a bug and you send it to a developer. A developer starts explaining that bug to you, even in very simplistic terms. I mean, say it's a web app, for example. Say they start talking about some of the front end, some of the JavaScript stuff. Say it's, I don't know, it's built on Node or something like that. If you can understand and take part in that conversation, I think it makes you more effective. Whereas if you're just kind of looking blankly and dumbly as they explain the actual reason for the bug that you've raised, I think it's in danger of kind of putting you as a bit of a second-class citizen.
I hear what you're saying there. I would agree with that partly, yeah. I don't think that being able to have developer chat would make you a valued team member, just that. I think you can be a valued team member.
It's an aspect. It's certainly not the only thing.
Yeah.
By
But
no
I think
means.
you can also be a valued team member without having that, because if you, take communication skills for example.
Yeah.
If you've got the communication skills and you have the confidence and you know what you're doing and you find a bug and you can detail that bug, why that bug's occurring to the developer, and then they don't necessarily have to detail back the reasons. I guess you kind of already know that when you found the bug. If you found the reason and you've written that,
Well, you know the symptom. They may want to communicate the root cause back to you.
they might want to do that, but I don't think that being able to talk to them at that technical level that a developer might want to talk to you at is a necessity to be valued by a team. I think if you're not valued because you can't speak that development language, I guess, then I think that says a lot about the team and about the developer that's
Potentially,
communicating with you as well.
potentially. And I think, kind of picking up on what you said, communication is the absolutely key thing. I mean, the days are way gone where you used to have a dev team sometimes in one building or even one continent and a test team in another, and communication via bug report.
Yeah.
But I think there are still pockets of where that exists, and I think you mentioned confidence earlier, and confidence is a really, really important thing, because I think if you're not confident in your abilities, and there's a very definite danger that you could fall into that sort of trap of communicating via bug reports, communication via Jira or something like that, and that's not the most effective way to work at all.
I think on an even more basic term, that if you aren't confident, then that's going to be spotted and people aren't going to think that you are an expert at all.
Yeah.
So they're not going to see much value, I guess. So
No, I mean, you shouldn't be quiet, essentially. And particularly in agile teams, which are increasingly set up, particularly when we look at the move towards increased automation and so on, the sorts of skill sets in those teams. Say you're a manual tester, you're in an agile team. There's probably not very many of you. There may be one or two potentially. So yeah, being confident and speaking up is very, very important to be effective in a team like that.
you've kind of touched on another subject then, with the role of automation. So, I mean, we all see tons of adverts every day for these hybrid automation experts and exploratory sapient testing experts and have performance testing skills and security testing skills as well. So everybody seems to want someone that can do everything.
Yep.
Why?
Why? Because people aren't very good at writing job adverts, basically. It's an interesting subject.
So, going on to talk about different levels, a lot of team members are seen at different levels from other roles within the team. So, take automation for example, that's a big buzzword right now.
Yep.
So, automation experts are coming in and they're getting paid tons more money than what a sapient tester would get.
It's kind of an implicit hierarchy.
It is, but it's something that I just disagree with, because I think that testers should be seen at the same level as developers and automation experts.
Yep.
So
I think it comes down again though. It comes down to value. So it comes down to as an effective team member, how you can demonstrate in that team what your value is. And let's kind of, if we kind of for a minute didn't talk about the specific recruitment bit. So just assume you're in a team, and that team, you've been in that team for a while, and if say for example the product owner is not willing to make that release decision until they've got information from you as a manual, as a sapient tester, and they implicitly trust what you do, there's no reason why that's any more or less important than the results of automation. In fact, frankly, there's a certain argument that says it's actually more important, because you're a clever human being putting a set of human eyes across a piece of software, not a machine checking whether certain business flows through a particular piece of software are actually operating correctly. So it's, yeah, as it stands at the moment, it's a bit of a supply and demand thing in the wider market, I think.
Do you think we'll ever be able to change it though? Because it seems to be that the misconceptions are at the business level, right? And it's not necessarily at the team level, because if you're communicating to people and you're showing your confidence and your team is actually valuing you and the work that you're doing, but that might not necessarily reach the business.
I guess so.
The people that hire and set salaries.
It's a bigger thing than that. It's let's fix the anyone can test problem first.
Another huge misconception.
Yeah.
Anyone can test, but it doesn't mean
anyone can test
good.
Yes. Absolutely. Anyone can test. Most people, if it's not their specialism, are probably not doing it very well. In exactly the same way as, frankly, I can go away and write you a computer program if you like. It is not going to be as good as someone with 14 years of programming experience.
Very true. That's one of the problems, I think, is there are so many misconceptions about what testing is and what testers do.
Yeah, and it does. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it in almost every company that I've worked for, where testers are seen as button clickers, and you do. Well, I certainly do try and dispel all the misconceptions, and it does work. But there's so many companies out there that have these misconceptions.
Yeah, but if everybody, and it comes back to that. To be an effective team member, you need that communication, and you need that ability when you go into a team to start dispelling those misconceptions. And if you do that, that's one of those are the sorts of things that get you really accepted in a team, because you're seen as somebody who can explain what they do. They can explain the value behind who they are and what value they're actually bringing to the team, so people see the point of them being there and miss them when they're not there. But also, you can, if you do that in your team, and somebody else does it in their team, and so on and so on and so on and so on. That's how these sorts of misconceptions get go away. It's not going to be it's bottom up. It's not top down.
Yeah, it's totally true. One thing that I've used a lot for helping to communicate with difficult people that are difficult to communicate with, for example, developers that do have the misconceptions and they've got the them versus us mentality, and any bug that you raise is seen as a challenge against their coding practices.
Well,
and principles.
you are almost questioning kind of their fundamental. You can be seen as questioning their fundamental beliefs, and that's.
Yeah, but it's not. We're trying to.
It's not, but
work towards building a
yeah.
better product together. You know. So, but one thing that I do is influence.
Yep.
Use tea, donuts, cakes.
Yep.
Get them on side. The rule of reciprocation.
Yep.
Get them on side with. It's not bribery.
It's not bribery if there's not an obvious reward. So it's not like
exactly.
I'll make you a cup of tea if you're nice to me. It's just I'll make you a cup of tea. It's far more subtle than that.
Yeah. But the rule of reciprocation is great. It basically means that if you do a favour or give a gift or if you do anything for someone else, then subconsciously they will reciprocate back to you. So that worked. That worked for me. That continues to work for me right now. So everyone should have Donut Fridays. Any excuse for a donut.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
So let's talk about emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit before when we were talking about kind of questioning fundamental beliefs and stuff like that. I think there's definitely there's a way to talk to people, particularly let's use the developer-tester relationship, and testers have kind of traditionally often been seen as the bearers of bad news. Now we know that's in reality not correct. We're providers of information. However, if you're a developer and say you've worked on a piece of code for, I don't know, let's say a week. It's not good practice, but let's say you've been working on it for a week. You probably built up. You put a lot of your own effort into it, and therefore you probably do have an emotional attachment to it. It's very, very unlikely that you don't in some way or another. And as testers, what we're doing is we're coming along and potentially saying, well, sorry, this bit doesn't work, this bit doesn't work, this bit doesn't work, this bit doesn't work. Oh, and by the way, I think you screwed that up. And if that's communicated in the wrong way, if that's communicated in a very blunt, in-your-face way, then I can completely understand why, as a developer, your natural reaction would be to push back against stuff like that. And that's not going to kind of help a team work effectively. There's ways to communicate in the kind of the bugs and changes required in a much more essentially positive way, maybe by framing them in the context of the bigger picture.
Yeah, what I tend to do as well, whenever I'm communicating a bug or defect with a developer face to face, I'll start by talking about what's good. What's good about the software. Oh, I love this new feature, this is working perfectly. Oh, but this, I've got a problem here. I think I found a bug. This is the details, you know, and then that way, having that approach where you're not just going in all guns blazing saying, oh, this is terrible, damn bug, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of that.
They are more open to having a conversation about a civil conversation rather than getting their backs up.
So I think even the best developer who cares most about the quality of the product, if you march up to them and essentially slap a proverbial bit of paper down in front of them and say and sort of go, what the hell is this rubbish? that's gonna get really quite annoying, and
I feel an experiment coming on.
That's a new podcast series. Yes, Dan goes around annoying developers. But yeah, that's a really important thing, and I think it's being able to understand one's emotions and understand the emotions in others, even kind of taking some very kind of simple emotional models, for example, can really help, because they can help you. They can almost act as kind of like a checkpoint. So you think, hang on a minute, I'm actually going to think about the effect of how I communicate this first, and then after having done that, then I'm going to go and have the conversation. So it enables you to kind of prepare and think about the emotional impact of the message that you're going to go and give. And I think that's a very important thing.
Interesting. Tell me more about emotional models.
There's a couple of kind of famous ones. I mean, there's a guy called Robert Plutchik who's probably done that. He did one called the Circle of Emotion. It's probably the most famous one, where he essentially takes very basic emotions, split I think into 8 different basic emotions, and then uses those in order to essentially explain not only the emotions you feel, but then how those emotions can be maybe stronger or weaker depending on the particular circumstance. I mean, it's one I would definitely recommend going away and having a look at. It's a very pictorial, visual thing. I'm not going to attempt to explain it on a podcast because it really won't work. There's 2 options actually. Blatant self-plug coming in here. You can Google it, or if you're at Nordic Testing Days, I'll actually be talking about it.
Nice one.
So if you are in Estonia, come along.
You need to do it here as well.
Absolutely, I can do it here.
So
yeah, those emotions, understanding the emotions, and then also ensuring that you're kind of framing things not necessarily in a completely positive message, but you're framing things in a essentially a message that is fair and can seem to be fair, I think can really, really help you as a tester in a team, can really, really help you be effective, maintain those relationships as well. Because let's not forget, I mean, we've talked a little bit, or quite a bit, I think, about using that, how you, when you go into a team, what you need to do. But the reality is, relationships of any sort need maintenance, whether they're relationships within the team, whether they're your relationship with your girlfriend or your wife or your kids or whatever. all of that needs maintenance. You can't just do all the work at the beginning and then forget about it afterwards.
It's true. And all of them examples you can use your influence skills as well.
You absolutely can. I mean, I think, to be honest, I think a lot of what we talk about here is it's very, very applicable, and the examples we give are very applicable to software teams. But the reality is, in the wider world, they're equally applicable.
Yep, totally. So what advice would you give people then, talking about emotion in teams? What would you say to people that aren't closely situated with the team that they're working with? So if someone's offshore, or if the communication is via email, or...
I think you need some of that communication to be visual. Now, whether that's through something like Hangouts or Skype or something like that, some of it needs to be visual, and also some of it needs to be social rather than purely work related. So something as simple as, I don't know, everybody dials into a daily stand-up 5 minutes early, or a few people dial in 5 minutes early, and they have that sort of pre-meeting chat that people have. I think if you're remote, that's a really, really important thing to kind of establish you as a member of a team. And teams are increasingly working more remotely. So whether that's more remotely in terms of within, say, the UK or wherever, or teams being situated across continents, it's happening more and more frequently now. I think remote working has been seen to work, but you've got to have that essentially FaceTime. You could use FaceTime. You've got to be able to see people. I think
it's interesting how you're trying to simulate. Well, in essence, you're trying to simulate the water cooler effect.
Yes.
Having 5 minutes before
Yeah.
a meeting, Yeah. So that's really interesting. That would allow you to build relationships and build up a rapport with people that you would really only communicate with them on a work basis.
Yeah.
So building rapports and building relationships and friendships as well is really important.
It is, and I think if you work in a remote team, it certainly helps, at least occasionally, to actually meet the people you work with. I mean, I think one great thing about working in an agile team, particularly if it's a well-functioning team, is that there are close-knit relationships in there. You do go out for a beer with people, or go out for a meal or whatever. You do have this kind of team social bonding, and I think that's needed even if you're in a remote team. Sure, it's going to happen less frequently, but it should definitely still happen. So otherwise it is more of a group of individuals.
What I think should happen is there should be more mixed community events. So like we all go to testing community events, the LTG, lots of different conferences, but there should be something that mixes testers and developers and TPMs and BAs, and everyone's there so that everyone can get that social interaction.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because you don't tend to. I see that a little bit. Just thinking about conferences as an example. I mean, I see sometimes in the mobile space, there does tend to be mobile conferences, and so it's almost like cutting things vertically when you organise a conference rather than cutting them horizontally. That makes sense. So rather than having a Java conference and a Ruby conference and a testing conference and so on, you have a mobile conference, and the sorts of people who go to that, they're anyone who's interested in the overall marketing, design, development, production, sale of mobile apps. And that's the only real conferences that I've been to where there has been a really, really broad mix of people. Otherwise, you tend to get those sorts of situations where it's like, oh, I'm the developer at a testing conference, or I'm the tester at a... I went to a continuous delivery conference recently, and there were a few testers there, but we've definitely kind of in the minority, but also maybe making a bit of being in the minority. which is just all, we're all involved in the delivery ultimately of software.
Yeah. You do get your Agile conferences,
That's true.
and
Yeah,
you do get.
that's true.
I'm pretty sure you must get conferences for like e-commerce conferences, for example. But I don't know how much of that would actually be like the development side.
The technical side,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah, because I say, I've certainly seen it in mobile. I've seen mobile do, for one reason or another. Maybe it's just simply because mobile applications are still essentially smaller and more kind of tightly packaged, and there isn't so many ecosystems, and therefore essentially the technical side can be seen to be kind of smaller.
Yeah. But do you think it's because with mobile, they're really actually just mobile dev conferences, but there isn't any testing conferences for mobile specifically?
No, I don't think so. The mobile conferences do seem, certainly the ones that I've been to, they tend to be focused more around apps. So mobile
okay.
apps conferences. So anybody involved in apps is in one place.
Yep.
And there's one coming up in London in June, Mobile Apps World, for example. And there's a technical track, and in that technical track there's development, there's some people talking about testing, for example. There's a lot of people talking about design and
Interesting.
users and so on. I personally haven't seen that in a lot of other areas. That may just be, to be fair, I haven't really gone out and really looked. But
Well,
if it
maybe
happens,
this will inspire someone to start a web app conference.
yeah, or in fact tell us that one already exists, and that we just need to search a bit better. One thing we haven't talked about, which I think really, really helps the team work together effectively, is pairing people up in a team. So pairing, for example, developers and testers together, or developers and developers, or testers and testers, or whoever. I think that can also really, really help, because if you're working very, very closely with somebody, even for a short length of time, you're going to get to know each other better, and also you're going to feel their pain more, and they're going to feel your pain more, and you're going to kind of bond over that shared experience.
I'm a huge advocate of pairing, particularly with a developer, because I'll get to influence them and teach them about what testing is, what testing involves, getting them thinking about testability during their development. And I'll get to learn from them. I'll get to learn a little bit of programming skills. I'll get to learn more about the product that I'm about to test, so I'm a huge fan of pairing. I love paired testing as well.
Yeah.
Just purely to be able to bounce ideas and learn from other testers' experiences as well.
Yeah.
So
I think that can also help that confidence thing. If you're a tester and you go into a team and you're maybe suffering a little bit with a lack of confidence in the whole team context, just pairing up with one developer or one other tester, that can really, really help.
Yeah.
It can help that confidence, and then it can also help that confidence grow, so that then you're more likely to feel more comfortable anyway in front of the whole group.
Yeah, because it does emphasise that you're in it together. You're in it as a team of two for that particular task that you're trying to do. So you're both going to help each other. There is no silly questions. It's like you ask a question because you don't know the answer, and the person that you're pairing with, they will try and help you find the answer. So yeah, pairing's fantastic.
Yeah, it works for podcasts as well, doesn't it?
Podcast alone would be quite lonely.
It would be a bit odd. You would also get some rather strange looks when you're sitting in the corner of the pub talking to your phone by yourself. I think maybe that's a good point to leave it.
This has been an interesting chat today.
Absolutely, and I think we've kind of scratched the surface. There's I'm sure a lot of stuff we haven't covered. It would be very good, anyone listening to this, give us some feedback. Either tweet us at testinginthepub, or we're also at testinginthepub.co.uk, and tell us what you think. So that's all for this time, and we'll be back with another podcast very soon.